I'm Melanie LaForce, and I'm here to tell you about Fort Stevens Day, July 16th, 2022. Fort Stevens Day is an annual event that occurs in Brooklyn, a neighborhood of Washington, D.C., and this event commemorates the Battle of Fort Stevens. A lesser-known and smaller battle, but nonetheless an important one in the history of our nation and in the story of the Civil War. Now, before I begin, I want to dedicate this short little video to Dan Smith. He was a man who was much loved, who did so much for so many people, and who will be remembered. When we think about the Civil War, we think about the violence, we think about the battles, the cataclysmic tragedy. We think about cannon and bullets and rifles. We really don't think too much about the lives of the wives, the mothers, the children. We need to think about the nurses. In the time of the Civil War, the Capitol Dome hadn't been finished yet, and Abraham Lincoln ordered it to be finished. Hot air balloons were being flown in experimentation right by the Capitol. Steam trains were getting people to travel greater distances. Steamboats were carrying people all the way from New York City to California. This was a time of great change, and the role of women was changing too. Even before the Civil War, women were beginning to struggle for universal suffrage, for the right to vote. And yet, with the outbreak of the Civil War, that had to be cast aside as women turned to the sewing, the tending, the preparing of their men, their husbands, brothers, sons, friends, as they marched off to war. But the women just didn't step aside and watch their men march off. They also mustered up into those regiments and took care of their men. They nursed the wounded and the ill. They brought whatever skills they had from whatever rural or urban background they came from, because of their sheer force of will, their sense of duty to their boys in blue and in gray, their sense of faith that what they were doing was the good thing, the kind thing, the compassionate thing, because they cared. This particular Fort Stevens Day, we honor the women for their fortitude, their courage, their sense of duty, their faith, for their sacrifice.
That's what this war was all about. At the end of the day, it was about 3.9 million African Americans who were enslaved in the United States and had no prospect of ever getting freedom. First document that promised freedom to those African American soldiers was the Emancipation Proclamation. And as my friend Asa Gordon likes to say, that proclamation came with a an enforcement clause. That proclamation that said all the stuff up top about people being free, and then paragraph 8 says, persons of suitable condition will be enlisted in the Union Army. That paragraph, I'll tell you a story about another powerful woman. That paragraph wasn't in it. At one point, Abraham Lincoln stops at a contraband camp called Camp Barker. He's there because his cook at his summer home, Mary Dines, convinces him he ought to stop by there in June of 1862. He's drafted the Emancipation Proclamation. But that paragraph is not in there. Mary Dines convinces him to stop by this contraband camp, and it's after President Lincoln makes this visit that he adds paragraph 8 to the Emancipation Proclamation. So I'd like to thank Mary Dines for giving these soldiers an opportunity, black soldiers, a chance to join the war, to show that they would fight. As Denzel Washington said, to show that they would take a bullet just like everybody else because they wanted their freedom. Congressmen, senators, when they are debating the 13th Amendment to the Constitution, which abolishes slavery forever, they say these men earn their right to freedom on the battlefield. These men earn their right to citizenship under the 14th Amendment on the battlefield. And yes, they earn their right to vote. Let us thank Mary Dines, who left us the legacy of the paragraph 8 of the Emancipation Proclamation.
All day long, the best that can be seen is Angeline Baker, Angeline the Baker, Angeline, Angeline, Angeline the Baker. Angeline the Baker, her age is 23. I gave her krautwurst by the pound, but she won't marry me. Angeline the Baker, well, Angeline the Baker, Angeline, Angeline, Angeline the Baker.
Basically what the Sanitary Commission did. You might get a call like, we need hospital quilts, but it's not for the soldiers from DC, it's soldiers from Iowa. But the soldiers from DC, they need drawers. But some ladies from Pennsylvania are making those. You may not be able to supply it directly to your husband, your father, your son, but you know that some other woman will.
I'm in awe of the women who served as nurses in the Army, the U.S. Sanitary Commission, or whether they mustered up with their sons in their very own regiments. But I'm also in awe of the women who fought in battle, dressed as men. Yes, this was a time of great change.
Sarah/Franklin was chosen to be a nurse in the beginning of the war. She served in the First Battle of Bull Run, or First Battle of Manassas. She was almost captured by Confederates there because she wanted to stay with her patients. Eventually, she was also tasked with delivering the mail. She became a very welcome sight in camp when she came in. All the soldiers were happy to see her because they were hoping for mail from home. So while she was delivering the mail, she actually, her mule that she was riding fell and rolled over onto her. And she decided she was not going to seek medical attention for this because, of course, if she did, she'd be discovered to be a woman. She said she'd rather have been shot dead than to be found to be a woman among the ranks of men. So she decided she was going to basically suck it up and take care of her wounds herself, which she did. And as a result of this, she became debilitated later in life.
There was a famous nurse, and her name was Clara Barton. She was a field nurse, the first of its kind. And although she was every inch a lady, she served on the field in the middle of bullets and cannon fire. There is one nurse who is lesser known, and her name is Mary Moore's husband. Mary Moore's husband became so well known for her care of the soldiers, in her organization of the hospitals, in her courage and fortitude, but also in her ability to write persuasive letters of clemency for soldiers unjustly accused of desertion, that the soldiers came to love her. And in their affection for her, they gave her a nickname, Mother Husband. And on that last day of the Grand Review, when the war was over, and the soldiers marched in front of the White House, Mary Moore's husband was standing there in the stand. The soldiers stopped and raised their caps to cheer. Hooray for Mother Husband.
So we bonded together, we unified, we were sister nurses. And it is truly, truly awesome and wonderful. In all, I mean, of what we can do as human beings when we are kind, when we are compassionate, when we are strong, when we are calm, when we are merciful. Now, my heart broke many, many times at Smoke Town and at Letterman Camp after Gettysburg. I didn't need to see the battles, but the rumors came in. I saw nurses handling soldiers day in and day out for months on end, turning them over. I saw orderlies carrying in their heavy charges day in and day out into the night. I saw surgeons working by candlelight, day in and day out, and saving lives, hundreds of lives, thousands of lives, all over this world. The technology, the warfare that we use was so far advanced, so far beyond what we would ever understand. But our methods of medicine were so far behind that we were doing catch-up. And the nurses, they were there to fill in that gap, to clean up the blood, to peel away the crusty, muddy clothing from the wounds, open up the leg, and then clean the wound so the surgeon could see what he would need to do.
I wanted to give the women who served as nurses in the Civil War a voice. Their stories needed to be told. We honor the women of the Civil War and those who lived in Washington, D.C., especially one, Elizabeth Thomas, who gave up her land so that this Fort Stevens, could be built, and on which her land that pivotal battle occurred. What I would like to do is to thank all those people who worked really hard to organize, to meet, discuss, hash through all those issues and themes and ideas. I'd like to thank Marvin Tupper Jones for setting up the history truck with American University, that tiny tent where storytellers can tell big stories. And I'd like to thank the members of the board of the Alliance for the Preservation of Civil War Defenses of Washington, D.C., for making this event come to life. It commemorates an important battle in a peaceful way.